Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hatters, platters, and top order batters, welcome along to the Joe Spivey YouTube channel where we discuss books and little else. You join me for, I am believing, our fourth instalment of Non-Fiction November, the BookTube event, I think, brought into being by Olive at the Book Olive, who encourages those of you who are complete and unworkable and unsavable idiots that don't read any non-fiction to read some, and those of you that read some to read a little more non-fiction. A few administrative tasks. You join me, of course, on a fine, serene Friday here in the north of England. It is my maternal grandmother's 75th birthday today, so I'm sure you will all welcome me in commenting and wishing her a happy birthday. She watches my videos with as much zeal as all of you fangirls do. And also, I believe there was a Republican primary debate last night, and therefore YouTube thinks I'm a right-wing monomaniac and keeps giving me monologues of Vivek Ramaswamy, who is telling everybody to start running from something and start running to something. It keeps saying that, keeps blaming the media for all sorts. But yeah, that's about it. And today's book, without further ado, is Gideon Haigh's On the Ashes. Again, another collection of essays, our second collection of essays that we have done for Non-Fiction November. This focuses on the sport of cricket and the biennial series within the sport of cricket played between the international sides of Australia and England every couple of years, essentially. That's what biennial means. And yeah, this is absolutely marvellous. A little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of some more administrative work. I'll try and explain cricket and the Ashes hopefully rather succinctly. I don't want to be talking about leg spin and sticky wickets and getting all touchy-feely like that. Essentially, cricket is two teams of 11 players. Test cricket, anyway, is two teams of 11 players who toss a coin at the start of a big match. And then the captain who wins that toss either chooses to bat or to bowl. If you choose to bat, you have two batters in the centre, and you have the full 11 opposition team who field, who have a bowler and a wicketkeeper and who field. And that is essentially how it is played. And you have two, what we term innings, again, quite similar to baseball, I believe. And you try and score as many runs as you can, and the fielding team tries to restrict your runs, and you also try to bowl the other team out, and that is how you get them out. So that is it. The eponymous Ashes came, or springs from the famous the famous Australian tour to England of 1882, and in which, under a complete siege and domination for 5 or 10 years by the English sides, the Australians managed to win at the Oval in London. And satirically, at the time, I believe it was the Sporting Times that published this, there was a remark that went something along the lines of, English cricket is dead, the body will now be cremated and the ashes will be taken back to Australia. And it has lived on ever since. The 1885 tour afterwards was then predicated upon England's sole goal to reclaim those ashes, and it has run on like that ever since. Of course, from England versus Australia, just culturally, you get all sorts of dichotomies and adversarial oppositions. You have Australia, who are usually very scurrilously and wrongfully typified as this sort of irreverent, barbarous, chavvy, untucked shirt, upturned collar, people who would spit in the face of convention, versus, of course, the affluent, plum-throated, well-spoken upstanders of convention and rationality, England. Of course, that has become a little mixed in the modern era, but at the time that was a very, very, very common belief, and still punctures little bits of the rhetoric and discourse that surround contemporary cricket. So these are a collection of essays that Gideon Haigh has done, all the way from from about it explains why they're called the Ashes from 1887 right up to his anticipation of the latest series, which took place this summer. So it's about 400 pages. There are a few things that I wanted to highlight. He is a really, really, really good writer. I'll go into his positives. I might as well do it now. It has a verbal dexterity that the like of which is pretty much unmatched. Beyond, pretty much unmatched, certainly in the cricketing field and most of the time in sports writing. He's just got more, it just seems to have more words to work with. And as we know on this channel, we love circumlocution. I cannot praise writers enough when they go beyond the bounds of, just ordinary platitudes and cliches and solecisms. I like it when, they really try to grapple with an issue with complex terminology. He has a grasp for irony. He works with the dichotomies just described, and does a really great job of sort of trying to coax out some of that long-standing ambivalence and animosity and animus that exists between the two sides. He has a strong literary and historical grasp. He is very, very well read. If you Google him, you will get a picture of him hunched over a laptop. The typical jobbing scribbler, tapping away like Flint Lockwood in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Very good cultural reference there, Joe. With an incomprehensible bookcase behind him that goes, 13 feet up to the ceiling. And so he's a very well-read individual. And if ever you just Google him on, just YouTube him, he has done very many great interviews on both contemporary and historical events. So he's really jolly good. And what else did I want to say about him? He's also really sort of very, very, very tender, very emotional, and talks about a few things, a few tear-jerking themes in here, which are thoroughly enjoyable. Just a few things before I read out some of the sections that I wanted to highlight. There is, of course, an immense snobbery that comes along with sports in general, and therefore the concomitant writings that can sometimes spur from sports. So I know that lots of you that enjoy crime writing, mystery novels, Regency romances, and sports books face discrimination at every turn in the literary world, and that is no different for those of us that enjoy sports and sports books. They think that anybody that derives pleasure from watching a football match or a cricket match or a rugby match or an NFL match is a lager-swilling, tattooed, bald miscreant and dullard that doesn't know his left from his right. That is, of course, is palpably untrue. So there is that to contend with. I once argued rather vociferously with an ex-girlfriend's mum who had forced me through the 4-hour rigmarole of Eurovision, during which completely talentless, overpaid and unpopular idiots dress up in orange, green and red and dance around a stage for 4 hours and pretend that they have some sort of musical rhythm and ability. I was made to watch that for 4 hours in the presence of that family, and then just wanted to watch the FA Cup final highlights, which had taken place before, which I had sacrificed and wasn't allowed to. And then we had a huge debate on whether sport can be anything worthwhile, fruitful or valuable can be derived from sport, which of course it can. But they didn't think that. And try telling, a bunch of academics who you've just had a literary seminar with that you will not be going to said gig tonight because there is a football match on that you need to sit with your mates. Just wait for the animus to ensue. Just wait for them to spit into your face and tell you how much of a cave-dwelling, gutter-vomiting, crude idiot that you are. Just wait for that to come. But anyway, this is on the Ashes. I'm gonna show that the proof will be in the pudding. Never trust a review that doesn't quote or read out. I have also, just a quick mention as well, some cricket shirt here by Gray Nichols. So it's fancy dress day here on the Joe Spiver YouTube channel. Aren't you all in for a treat? So let us go. This is Haig's sort of brief introduction that he gives to the Ashes. He is an Australian. That must be said first of all. But this will, for those of you that are still curiously ignorant of what cricket is and what the Ashes represents after that all-encompassing introduction by yours truly, here is one for you anyway. There is in marketing an established taxonomy of brands, The ritual brand, identified with special occasions. The symbolic brand, identified with a recognised logo. The heritage of good brand, established as according a special benefit. The aloof snob brand, nourishing a sense of superiority. The belonging brand, which binds a self-perceived special group. And the legend brand, which derives from an epic story. If it be possible, Ashes cricket works on all 6 levels. And it is true. Ashes cricket, Test cricket, pretty much all facets of cricket in general are completely antithetical to the social contagion of the sort of pyrotechnical razzmatazz, the Vegas-esque flashing lights of short-term content and the fast 24-hour news cycle that so beleaguers us in this modern era, folks. Cricket, for me, has always been a definite antidote to that. And is bloody marvellous for that reason, and Haig evokes it better than anybody I've ever read that does. And then the second section that I wanted to highlight was a little bit of a run-through of Mr. Harry Trott, who captained one of the sides and was part of Australia's first full 5-test victory in England in the late 1890s, and then was summarily diagnosed with a mental health condition and kept in an insane asylum where essentially you were treated as a zoo animal and not as a human being with a real malady back then. So it's a real heartrending story. It begins as this. This is just marvellous from Haig. Cricketers great and humble meet one opponent equally. Sooner or later, all defer to time. Usually the end comes stealthily, muscles stiffen, reflexes slow and eyes dim. In some cases, though, it is abrupt, unceremonious, unkind, so sudden that it's as though the individual was never there to begin with. 105 years ago, in the summer of 1897-98, Harry Trott led Australia to its first win in a 5-test Ashes series. At 31, he was in his athletic prime and by common consent the world's wisest cricket captain. On his watch had emerged what historian Bill Mandel has called the unfiliable yearning to thresh the mother country, even as the constitutional undergirding of an Australian Commonwealth was being erected. But at the time of his fame, Harry Trott disappeared, never to play, let alone captain, another test. And though he reappeared as a man, it was as a marginal figure and a source of stifled embarrassment. For, didn't you know, poor Harry went mad. And he was consigned to, as I say, an asylum, essentially, a mental asylum for the criminally and homicidally insane, even though Haig comes to the conclusion that he was essentially, he would be modishly diagnosed as somebody with split personality disorder or somebody with, an acute mental health or disorder. The second section that I wanted to highlight was on, I believe it's on Bradman. Oh, Victor Trumper, who, if you type in Victor Trumper, it's essentially the first proper action-based cricketing photo. Because most of the cricketing photos that preceded the picture of Victor Trumper were long-distance photos because you have to sit around the boundary. Obviously, it's the best part of 100 yards between the person hitting the ball and a spectator in the stands. Anybody that's actually been to see cricket who is in Britain will know that it's not the finest flesh spectator sport. It's better to watch it on the television unless you want to swill 17 pints of lager, which may or may not be a partiality in my family. But yes, he talks about Victor Trumper's the attempts of biographers to construct life stories of him from very scrappy and minimal data. This is a really excellent paragraph that shows just how literarily aware he is and how it's obvious that Haig has written a great many books and knows the plight of authors up and down the world. Of Trumper, 3 previous biographers had struggled to make much. The primary material was thin, the residual mythology thick. To write about any figure of the past is essentially to make a claim for them, to make a mission of substantiating their significance. In sport, the allure is of great deeds, stirring victories, public approbation. Yet legend is an uneasy companion of biography, if not an outright enemy. And to track the Trumper story through the standard sources is a little like entering a hall of mirrors. Everyone is quoting everyone else. Stories and their origins have long since parted ways. And anybody who's read a thin biography, something on Shakespeare or some really distant figure that we don't know much about will concur with that. I thought that was a really excellent thing, and not something that many sports writers or hacking scribblers that just fill up the columns with their match reports would recognise and write about. Next we have Don Bradman, who is, a word for this cover, ladies and gents. How spectacular is this? You've got Shane Warne there, you've got Ben Stokes, Steve Waugh, I believe that's Bob Willis maybe, Ian Botham, and then on the back you have Sir Don Bradman here, who was, for a little bit of context, both the finest cricketer, the finest batsman of all time, the finest cricketer of all time, easily the most dominant and most proficient sportsman of all time. He was a statistical outlier, the like of which we will and probably have never and probably will never see again. Amongst all anthropological activity, any other human enterprise, he is so ridiculously dominant. Let me contextualise. A very, 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 very good batsman who bats for 15 and 20 years will average 50. That will be their average score, meaning every time they go out to bat, their average score is between 50 and 60. 1 week they'll score 150, the next they'll be out for nothing. 1 week they'll score 70, the next they'll be out for 20. That type of thing. That's the standard, and time has meant, throughout the eras, regardless of the helping hands of modern technology, there isn't a batsman alive that averages more than 60 and plays for more than 5 or 10 years. It is unheard of to be north of that. Donald Bradman ended his career averaging 99. That is, if you'll allow me to analogise, the literary equivalent of everything else being written in the Anglosphere by J.K. Rowling and Jeff Kinney and Sally Rooney and pick your other curiously mediocre author. That's as if every other book is written by those people, and you just have George Eliot producing a book a year of the quality that we've already discussed on this channel. The disparity between even the people that are brilliantly proficient professionals, legends of the game, and Donald Bradman is huge. There was a study done by his surname was, I think it was George Davis or Charles Davis, called The Best of the Best, where he looked at, it was actually just looking at all cricketers ever, but it was a look at, he analysed the top sportsmen that have ever existed, and his yardstick, his measurement was standard deviations that said person was away from the average mean of the time. And Donald Bradman was by far at least 2 standard deviations away from the mean of the cricket player. He was better than Pele in football, better than Babe Ruth, better than Michael Jordan, saw him off. So he is amongst so many domains and so many anthropological enterprises, the best and most proficient sportsman that has ever existed. But this is how Gideon evoked him. He said, the tightness of the fit between Bradman's feats and his public fancies were exquisite. His was the contemporary Australian journey. Still fewer than half Bradman's fellow Australians lived in cities. Bradman himself was off the land, as it were, but he also embodied the country's transition to an urban, white-collar future and its belief in social mobility. He was the country boy who became an estate agent, retail assistant, stockbroker, and finally company director. He was the poor boy who came to walk among kings and prime ministers and to enjoy an unostentatious wealth and merited honour. He was the ordinary man, small, compact, anatomically commonplace, prowess deriving not from fast twitch fibres like a sprinter or flipper-like feet like a swimmer, but from something about him, something in him, generally concealed, but when he came to the crease, on show for the world to see. That's, again, marvellous and marvellously done. He does all sorts about modern cricket. You have here Mr. Shane Warne, who was the archetype of that Australian that Australian stereotype that I talked about earlier. You can see there with his spiky hair and his red face. He was a cultural figure as much as he was a cricketing figure. If I can I quickly get to the bit there? Yeah, so this is the section that he writes on Shane Warne. I've written in the margin there, immensely quotable. So he says, Warne was a bowler in the 90s, so he's a much more modern figure. Warne was also busily transcending our conception of a cricketer in the culture. It need hardly be said that he rewrote the book on fame. In Australia before him, Bradman had set the standard for deportment and greatness, a monument as much as a man, a faintly austere figure rather sealed off by his renown. Warne ascended no pedestal. By his colourful lifestyle he made privacy elusive, but by his personality he made public dealings easy. In the aftermath of his death, it seemed that almost everyone had their own Warney story. He had a capacity for seeing others, for recognising them, for making them feel a little special. There had been glamorous cricketers before Warne, but nobody tackled fame so willingly, so hungrily, with an enthusiasm almost ingenuous. And again, if you haven't picked up from there that Haig is both passionate and professional, then the whole themes of passion and professionalism will be elusive to you, because he stands for that. It's really, really good. This was really excellent. Even though I'm starting to get tired of reading sort of episodic collections of essays, he doesn't do what the boondoggle of all collections of essays are, which is that when the writer comes to write a preface of the essay collection, decides to tell us that, of course, over the last 35 years, he's been angling in at one particular topic and tries to create some sort of false through line between all of the articles that he's written for the last 3 decades. He does not do that. He just talks about the Ashes and doesn't commit that great sin. But yeah, that was Gideon Haig's On the Ashes. What a cover. Not great for the non-cricket lover. It's not a great entrance point, but, you know, if you're curious and you're patient, then you will enjoy this. Yeah, look at the back, look at all those figures. There's Mr. Bradman there, Kevin Peterson, Ian Botham, who now advertises for sort of feet massage machines, so he's clearly hard up for cash. But yeah, that was Gideon Haig's On the Ashes. And just a quick one, our next book for Non-Fiction November, which I will, I'm sure, gallop through, is Hannah Arendt's The Oranges of Totalitarianism. That's going to be damn good. But yes, that's me for today, BookTube. I need to go and have a drink of water because my mouth is as dry as the proverbial. But yes, thank you ever so much for watching, and goodbye.